Okay, so the first step in drawing any portrait is that we want to start with a circle, and then we want to place our side oval. Now, this is the tricky bit. When you're drawing your side oval, I want you to think to yourself, the top of this oval needs to align roughly with my subject's hairline, and then the bottom of it needs to align with where the bottom of my subject's nose will live. Okay? If you keep those two things in mind, your proportions should be fairly accurate. Then we're going to draw a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. We're going to extend the hairline from the top of the oval. We're going to extend the brow line from the horizontal axis, and then we're going to extend the bottom of the oval for roughly where the bottom of the nose lives. Then we're going to draw the center line of the face, and then we're going to extend the vertical axis down and then connect that to the center line of the face. And then just so we don't have a floating head, we're going to punch in these necklines. And then we're going to establish our anchor point. The first anchor point is for the top of the upper lip, and then the bottom anchor point is for roughly where the bottom of that lower lip is going to live. And then we're going to place our cheek plane. And then what I like to do is I like to extend these shoulders a little bit, and it gives the sketch just a little bit more character, and it makes the drawing overall a bit more dynamic. Now, you don't have to sketch in the shoulders like this if you don't want to. I just like to. It's good practice as far as your proportions, not to mention you can use those shoulders to gauge your proportions for the hair and other bits of the drawing. And then what you want to do is you want to take a kneaded eraser and you just want to hit the Loomis head so it's more or less transparent. And then you can use that as the framework for the rest of your sketch. So you always want to start with the ear, right? The ear, according to this method, lives in the bottom rear quadrant of your side oval. When I say rear, I mean rear to the front of the face, okay? So we're sketching out the outer outline of the ear. And then in here, you can put in a little bit more of the detail of the inner ear. This reference is a little complex simply because of the nature of how her hair is laying across the top of the ear. But always start with the ear, and then you can use that to gauge the rest of your proportions. So watch me. Now that I have that ear placed, I'm going to extend the hairline up just like this. I'm following my reference, and I'm leading this line all the way up to the Loomis head's hairline. Once I get there, I'm going to solidify it, and then I can use that and draw the hair from front to back, because the nature of the extreme angle, she has her head up like this, and so her hair naturally is draping back. Yeah, something just like that. And now that I have that started, I'm going to work my way backwards. And I'm using the initial line work that I drew, moving up to the hairline, as a gauge for how far back these lines need to be. Okay. But yeah, I'm just pulling this back. And this right here is why we started with that ear, because as I'm drawing these lines, I'm looking at the ear, and that's how I'm able to guesstimate exactly how far back these lines need to be. Now, in other portraits, it really depends on the reference that you're drawing. You can just draw the outer outline, that basic two-dimensional shape of the hair, or you can go in while you're doing that and simultaneously draw in what I call the segments of hair. Now, this reference has a lot of different segments. You can see all those different sections of hair, and essentially that's what a segment is. That's what I call it. A segment equals section. You can see how these different bits of hair kind of clump together, right? But those different clumps, or segments, as I like to call them, flow in a certain direction. And so by sketching in those segments, within your basic two-dimensional shape of the hair, you are able to bring out the flow of hair. Now, this reference photo is really good practice for drawing segments of hair. So if you want to, it really depends on your confidence, but if you want to, you can sketch in the basic two-dimensional outer shape of the hair on your Loomis head, and then you can go in and you can start to place the segments. Or if you're just simply not confident enough, you don't have to do that. You can just stick with that basic two-dimensional outer shape. It's really up to you. But that is the best way that I have found to sketch hair like this. Outer shape first, then identify your segments, bring out that hair flow, and then go from there. And while you're punching in these segments, work on varying up your line qualities. Remember what the quality of a line is. It is the relative thinness or thickness of a line. So that'll just make your hair a little bit more dynamic. And now what we're going to do is we're going to switch from the basic Loomis head to the Asaro head. These are two different methods fused into one approach. But what we want to do is we want to identify the bridge plane, which of course sits directly in between the eyes. And so that's a horizontal line and then a vertical line. The vertical line plugs into the corner of the eyebrow. And so what we're doing is we're just worried about shape, right? Not detail. So we're going to draw in our basic shape for the eyebrow. Once that's done, we're then going to place these frame lines. Now these frame lines are what help you to identify and place your upper eyelid. This reference is a little different because not only is it an extreme angle, but her eyes are closed. And so it actually makes it fairly simple compared to if her eyes were open. And that's something that I think I'm going to do with this portrait. I've mentioned before how as time goes on, I'm going to get more and more involved with these sketches and start to show you how you can hatch and cross hatch and lower values, and eventually we'll move on to blending and all sorts of things. So we'll really make these things as dynamic as possible, but I want to slowly progress. I don't want to just do it all at once. And then that way, if you have questions about some of the initial steps, you can refer back to other videos and check those out before you move on to the more intense videos, right? All right, now as far as the nose, we want to start on the nose line, and then we want to bring out that bottom plane. You can clearly see the plane that I'm bringing out. It's that bottom plane. And then once we have that bottom plane identified, we can punch in the nostril. And then this line right here, this is the nose ridge plane. The nose ridge plane sits on top of the nose, and it plugs into the nose bridge plane, right? The ridge plugs into the bridge. And then you have your slope plane. Much like a mountain, you have the ridge of the mountain, which is the top, and then that mountain slopes down to the valley. It's the exact same principle when it comes to the nose. Now, we're going to extend this line down for the philtrum. We're going to place the corner of the mouth, and then I like to extend a line up from the corner and plug it into the philtrum. And then, given the nature of how her lips are sitting, we're just going to pull this over like that, and then I'm going to pull this down, and that more or less gives us our upper lip. And then I'm going to place this line here. This is to identify the bottom of the lower lip, which is where that anchor point roughly lives. And then I'm going to extend this line, but I'm not going to connect it, right? I want this line to be of a very, very light weight. I want it to look almost transparent. And then I'm going to pull this down. And we're going to start working on the chin of the subject here. Yeah, pull this down. She has a fairly rounded chin, so I just want to round that out. Yeah, something just like that. And then once you're satisfied with the shape of the chin, you can then pull the line down just like this, and more or less solidify the bottom of the jaw there and the beginnings of the subject's throat. And then I just kind of want to thicken up the jawline here. Yeah, and then I'm just going to kind of lightly sketch in kind of how these shadows live, right? Just like this. And by doing this, by doing these nice light hatches, you can start to bring out dimension in the face of the subject. But then right here, I've never shown you guys this, but if you look at the Asaro head, there is an Asaro plane here below the lower lip. And then I'm going to start punching in the Asaro planes for the cheek. So we extend a line off the corner of the mouth, and then we pull that line up, and that connects to the nose. Then we have our cheek plane. And then this line extends up to the eye, something just like this. We continue to extend that line where the cheekbone would live. And then we pull that line up, just like this. And then we'll extend back, straight back towards the ear. Now, the reason why the Asaro method is so successful is because it frames the underlying form for you. There's really no guesswork, and especially if you're a beginning artist, or maybe you're getting into comic drawing or whatever it is to where you're drawing human characters, it's really good to understand the underlying structure of a human face. You don't necessarily have to have it in your renders, but when it comes to practicing and just filling your sketchbook, right, this is a really, really good method to use. You think about a baseball player. When a baseball player is on deck, they swing and practice their form with an extremely weighted bat. It's not a bat that they would actually use in play, but they use it because it just helps them to really strengthen that muscle memory and streamline their technique for how they swing the bat. Take that same idea and now apply it to this, right? You would never actually showcase the Asaro planes in a realistic render, but you would know how to shade the face to achieve a realistic drawing because you sketched in these planes and then blended them, right? It's the exact same thing. So now that we have these planes identified, I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to start hatching these things out really lightly. We're not going to win any awards here, but one of the things that I want to show you is as you hatch more and more, you can start to lower the value. You can actually start hatching individual planes, and you will start to understand how dynamic you can make that sketch, and you'll start to see how Asaro was onto something many, many years ago with this method, is because the method allows you to see where those lower values need to live within your drawing. And one of the things that I like about the method, and one of the reasons why I use it myself and why I teach it the way that I do, is because there is no guesswork. Especially if you're starting out, you're like, oh, I don't know if I should shade this, but look at this here. See this? I'm hatching this plane. If you actually look at the Asaro head model and then you look at the subject, you could almost see the Asaro plane in the real life photo, right? That value. And so when I hatch it here on the drawing, you can start to see that form coming to life underneath the lower lip, shading the top lip, shading that bottom plane of the nose, coming in here, pulling these lines up from the jawline so that we start to have a sense of roundness, right? A sense of three-dimensional form, or at least a feeling of it. This is what the Asaro method allows you to do. And like I said, in future sketches, I will focus much more on this hatching and blending aspect of the drawing. But one of the reasons why I focus so heavily on the Loomis method and the Asaro method is because a lot of young artists struggle to do even that, right? And that's why I'm here. I'm here to show you those first couple steps. And then, like I said, as time progresses, we will get more and more involved. But we need to make sure that we can walk before we run. And in some cases, we need to make sure that we can crawl before we walk. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's how we all begin. Whether we acknowledge that or not, it makes no difference, because it's very much a truth of life. And it's the same with any craft that you pursue, whether it's baseball or drawing. And now right here, what I'm doing is I'm just going through because I really want to bring out these planes. Most of the time, when you're sketching in your Asaro planes, you will never use this thick of a line quality. But the reason why I'm beefing it up is because I want them to resonate with you. I want you to really see them, and I want you to practice them. And what's really crazy is after you do about 30 or 40 of these sketches, you'll start to remember exactly where those planes are, where they live within different reference photos, regardless of the angle. And you'll just start sketching them from memory. And then that's when you really know that you've moved on to the next chapter in your career, as far as your knowledge for how you render a sketch. You can do really long hatches, or you can cross hatch like I did underneath the chin and in certain aspects of the drawing. One of the things you'll notice is that if you just hatch, you will lower a value, but it'll tend to be of a higher value. And then if you want to lower that value in that same area, then you do what they call cross hatching, which is where you hatch the opposite way. And what'll happen with that is your value will drop, right? It'll get lower, it'll get darker, that saturation will start to come through, and the amount of saturation that you convey will really depend on how many times you crosshatch a specific area. And then here I'm just going through and I'm just thickening up some of these segments. I wanted to lower the value of that outer edge of the hair. But that's pretty much it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, never stop drawing.